What would happen if a halo ring, a weapon of unimaginable power, suddenly appeared in the Warhammer 40K galaxy? Worlds could fall, alliances could shatter, and even the strongest forces might face threats beyond comprehension. Power, ambition, and survival collide in ways no one could predict. Are you ready to witness the galaxy's ultimate clash? The sudden appearance of the colossal halo ring in the void of the Warhammer 40K galaxy sent ripples of astonishment and terror through every corner of nearby space. It was not just the scale that was breathtaking, massive enough to rival the orbit of entire star systems, but the way it had manifested without warning, seemingly out of nowhere, cutting through warp currents as if the laws of reality itself were bending around it. Imperial navigators aboard the nearest battlecruisers reported instruments failing, compasses spinning wildly, and psychic readings fluctuating in patterns that no known technology could decipher. Even seasoned veterans of the Astra Militarum, accustomed to chaos and Xenos threats, found themselves staring in mute awe as the ring's colossal curve reflected distant starlight like an impossible cathedral of light in the darkness. The Adeptus Mechanicus dispatched Magi techno-scholars, their robed forms huddled over arcane machinery designed to measure and contain phenomena far beyond human comprehension. They muttered in binary cant and machine prayers, attempting to decode the sudden intrusion into the galaxy's familiar spacetime. Their calculations suggested impossible energies, structures, and gravitational forces all coalescing in a single coherent artifact. Some whispered that the ring was not merely a machine, but a monument to some incomprehensible intelligence, a relic of a civilization whose knowledge eclipsed even the machine god's most sacred repositories. Meanwhile, inquisitors aboard orbital stations debated the implications, questioning whether this sudden arrival was a trial, a test, or a warning from forces unknown. Fear and curiosity intertwined in the hearts of all who gazed upon it. As word of the ring's appearance spread, chaos forces began to stir, drawn by its presence like moths to a dark flame. The warp resonated with strange energy, twisting thoughts and visions among psychers and sorcerers. Even minor warp storms seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ring's orbit, and whispers of corruption slithered into the minds of those attuned to the dark. Cults and daemon worshippers proclaimed the ring as a herald of new power, a possible weapon to shatter the Imperium or to summon entities long thought forgotten. Chaos warbands ventured into the sectors surrounding the ring, navigating through unstable warp currents, eager to claim a fragment of its alien might. Each step into its orbit felt like trespassing into forbidden geometry, where natural law was a suggestion rather than a command. Xenos factions, too, could not ignore this anomaly. The Eldar, in their elegant craft, arrived silently, their far-seeing farseers sensing threads of fate interwoven with the ring's presence. Whispers among them spoke of lost civilizations, echoes of technologies that rivaled the craft worlds themselves. They debated whether to intervene, study, or merely observe, knowing that any misstep could trigger catastrophic conflict among the galaxy's already fractured factions. Meanwhile, the Orks, in their brutish curiosity, launched several scouting vessels, the sheer chaos of their reactions adding a reckless unpredictability to the surrounding sectors. The ring had become a focal point, a magnet for every faction seeking advantage, knowledge, or dominion. The physical space around the ring itself was not benign. Gravity fields fluctuated without warning, causing ships to veer off course. Collisions narrowly avoided as navigators scrambled to compensate. Instruments registered impossible readings. Stars seemed to shimmer in impossible wavelengths, and sensors detected energy signatures that defied classification. Pilots and crew reported sudden vertigo, feelings of déjà vu, and a disquieting sensation that the ring's surface itself was observing them. Some psychers claimed they could hear the ring's voice, a subtle hum beneath the machinery of reality, coaxing or warning those sensitive enough to perceive it. Even the most hardened Imperial Navy officers were forced to confront a level of incomprehensibility that no drill, training, or battlefield experience could prepare them for. Within the Imperium, debates raged over the proper response. Was the ring a tool to be controlled, a threat to be destroyed, or a sacred artifact to be revered? Commanders and ecclesiarchs argued with fervor, invoking scripture, prophecy, and the machine god's will in equal measure. Plans were drawn to send boarding parties, armed with nothing more than faith, bolters, and fragile understanding of Forerunner engineering. The Adeptus Mechanicus, ever hungry for technological revelation, insisted that the ring must be studied, scanned, and its secrets harnessed, even as they acknowledged the extreme dangers inherent in doing so. Every strategy, however, was tinged with fear, as the implications of interacting with such an artifact remained shrouded in uncertainty and cosmic scale. As the days passed, the ring's presence began to influence surrounding space more visibly. Radiation bursts of strange, unclassified energy cascaded outward, interfering with communications and navigation systems. Local star systems displayed anomalies, sudden auroras, minor gravitational shifts, and spatial distortions that made planetary orbits erratic. Observers noted that the ring seemed almost alive, not in any organic sense, but as if it were a self-regulating mechanism, responding to intrusions, observation, or perhaps simply existing as an extension of some higher purpose. Imperial psychers detected subtle threads connecting the ring's influence to the warp. Though unlike typical demonic presences, these threads were strangely ordered, hinting at a logic that could never be fully understood. Among the fleets that gathered, tension mounted. Skirmishes broke out not from hostility, but from miscalculations caused by the strange forces surrounding the ring. A single ship drifting too close could be torn apart by gravitational eddies, its crew lost in seconds to realities they could not perceive. The presence of the ring forced alliances of convenience, temporary truces, and the constant tension of potential betrayal. Every faction sensed the same truth. This was not an ordinary structure, and the consequences of misunderstanding it could ripple across the galaxy in catastrophic ways. Among the fleets that gathered, tension mounted. Skirmishes broke out not from hostility, but from miscalculations caused by the strange forces surrounding the ring. A single ship drifting too close could be torn apart by gravitational eddies, its crew lost in seconds to realities they could not perceive. The presence of the ring forced alliances of convenience, temporary truces, and the constant tea. The citizens of nearby imperial worlds watched in fearful fascination. Religious leaders proclaimed the ring as a divine test, preaching sermons that warned of judgment and salvation, while secretly, Marines and planetary defense forces prepared for an unknown threat. Even the most stoic inhabitants felt a mixture of awe and terror, sensing that their lives and futures were entwined with a force beyond their comprehension. Tales of the ring spread, whispered along corridors of power, through bustling hive cities and across the void, growing in mythic resonance with each retelling. Within the ring itself, though invisible to most observers, systems hummed and activated with a quiet, inexorable rhythm. AI constructs stirred, energy conduits pulsed, and ancient defenses that had lain dormant for millennia began subtle calibrations, preparing for unknown visitors. The halo was not merely an artifact. It was a presence, one that brought the weight of countless ages and technologies into the already fractured, war-torn galaxy. The first contact, tentative and fragile, had begun, and the galaxy held its breath, unaware of the full scale of what had arrived among the stars. The appearance of the halo ring brought with it distortions that defied all known Imperial measurement. Warp currents in the surrounding sectors began to twist and contort as if the ring's presence had infected reality itself. Navigators aboard Imperial ships reported sudden spatial dislocations, their void compasses spinning erratically, and astropathic signals flickering in incoherent patterns. Psychers felt a strange tension in their minds, a subtle pressure that seemed to stretch their perception of time and space. It was as if the very fabric of the immaterium were aware of the ring, responding to it, reshaping its flow, and teasing the boundaries between the material universe and the warp. The experienced officers could only watch helplessly as their navigational charts warped in ways that should have been impossible. Imperial scholars of the Adeptus Mechanicus pored over readings, their cogitators screaming incomprehensible warnings as energy signatures poured in from the ring. The readings suggested a resonance between the ring's alien technology and the warp itself, creating feedback loops that triggered local psychic phenomena. Minor warp storms erupted seemingly at random, flaring and vanishing in the blink of an eye, making even seasoned spacefarers wary of approaching. Those who attempted to pass through the affected regions reported visions of impossible geometry and whispers of unfamiliar languages echoing in their minds. The Adeptus Mechanicus began to suspect that the ring itself might be influencing the warp, intentionally or as an unconscious consequence of its operation. Among Psychers, both Imperial and Xenos, the effects were more profound. Those sensitive to the immaterium described sudden surges of power that were uncontrollable and frightening. Warp currents that had once been navigable now twisted unpredictably, carrying mental impressions and emotions from distant worlds and distant beings. Some Psychers experienced flashes of memory that were not their own, visions of worlds destroyed, alien voices, and even fleeting glimpses of the ring's interior. The chaos corrupted felt their dark gifts amplified, yet unstable, while loyalist Psychers found their meditations interrupted by strange pulses of alien energy. It became clear that proximity to the ring carried both risk and potential, a perilous mixture that drew both curiosity and dread. The Imperium, already accustomed to the hazards of warp travel, struggled to adapt. Fleets attempting to chart safe routes around the ring found entire sectors oscillating in and out of navigable space. Even the most advanced navigational arrays were unreliable, failing to predict sudden gravitational anomalies or the onset of psychic storms. In some regions, void ships disappeared entirely, only to re-emerge light years from their intended destinations. battered and crewed by dazed sailors, unable to comprehend how they had arrived. The warp interference created a chaotic battlefield, where technology and psionic power became unreliable, forcing captains to rely on intuition and the guidance of sanctioned psychers. The Chaos factions, however, saw the ring's interference as an opportunity. Daemons whispered to mortal servants that the artifact was a channel to increase their influence in the material realm. Cultists and sorcerers sought to align themselves with the subtle flows of energy emanating from the ring, attempting to harness the unpredictable currents to empower spells and summonings. Yet the warp's response was volatile, and many were consumed by the very energies they tried to manipulate. The Chaos warbands learned quickly that the ring did not serve anyone willingly. It challenged all who approached, a puzzle of raw power and incomprehensible design. Each attempt to manipulate its energies left lasting scars on the surrounding space, sometimes producing bursts of demonic manifestation or spontaneous psychic feedback that echoed across light years. Xenos factions approached the phenomenon with a mix of awe and caution. Eldar farseers sensed that the warp distortions were unlike anything previously encountered. Threads of fate were knotted, as if the ring's presence wove itself into the immutable tapestry of the galaxy. They observed that some warp currents seemed to align with the ring's orbit, forming loops and patterns that suggested intentional design or natural consequence of immense technological power. The Tau and other technologically advanced species attempted long-range scans, but their instruments too fell victim to the warp-induced anomalies, producing data so contradictory that councils of strategists argued endlessly about interpretation. The ring had rendered standard measures of reality unreliable, forcing every faction to reconsider what they understood about physics, space, and the immaterium. As the interference grew, the halo ring itself seemed almost sentient in its influence. Energy pulses radiated outward, interacting with warp storms and psychic flows in unpredictable ways. Ships that lingered in close proximity experienced subtle vibrations through their hulls, the metal resonating with alien harmonics that no human ear could fully perceive. The sensation was unnerving, as if the ring were observing them, testing their intentions or probing the limits of their technological and psychic capabilities. Astropathic communication became erratic, with messages arriving days late or altered in meaning, sometimes carrying fragments of strange alien syntax that left the receivers in a state of confusion or fear. Even the surrounding star systems reacted to the ring's presence. Stellar phenomena shifted subtly, with minor solar flares and radiation bursts corresponding to peaks in warp activity. Planets that should have orbited predictably began to wobble slightly, creating small tidal disruptions that affected both oceans and atmosphere. Astronomers aboard Imperial outposts struggled to reconcile these changes with traditional understanding, finding that the ring's effect was not localized but extended across multiple light years. Its interference with warp currents and gravitational fields made predictions nearly impossible, adding a layer of chaos to an already unstable region of space. Those who ventured too close reported an unsettling sensation of awareness, as if the ring's presence extended beyond mere physics. Sensors detected electromagnetic fluctuations that defied classification, and some officers swore they could feel a subtle pressure on their minds, guiding their thoughts or warning them against certain actions. Even the most skeptical mechanicus tech priests began to whisper that the halo might possess a form of consciousness, an intelligence bound to its technology and its purpose, operating on scales of time and logic far beyond human comprehension. Military planners of the Imperium found themselves paralyzed between opportunity and fear. The ring's interference made conventional fleet maneuvers dangerous, and yet its potential as a strategic asset was undeniable. Boarding parties equipped with the most resilient void suits and psychic shielding were prepared, yet all knew that the Warks' unpredictable influence would challenge their very perception of reality. Any encounter risked not only physical destruction, but also mental unraveling, as the halo's presence reached into the minds of those who dared to approach too closely. The galaxy had never faced such a convergence of alien technology and warp instability, and each faction knew that caution, curiosity, and audacity would all be tested in equal measure. The Imperium of Man reacted with a mixture of awe, fear, and rigid authority to the sudden arrival of the Halo Ring. Orders were transmitted across multiple sectors as fleets were recalled or redirected to investigate the phenomenon. Admirals and planetary governors issued directives demanding immediate reconnaissance, while the Adeptus Mechanicus prepared specialized task forces equipped with the most advanced measurement devices and void shields available. Every available ship capable of long-range warp travel was mobilized, yet even the most confident captains felt unease as they approached a structure whose scale defied comprehension. In the command halls, strategists debated how to balance caution with the pressing need to assert imperial dominion over a potentially universe-altering artifact. Adeptus Mechanicus Magi techno-scholars boarded void ships, their robes fluttering in artificial gravity as they activated arcane machinery designed to interact with alien energies. They muttered binary cant and prayers to the machine god, their words meant to invoke protection and guidance against forces they could scarcely understand. These scholars believe the Halo Ring to be both a tool and a challenge, a relic of a civilization whose technological mastery far exceeded anything the Imperium had ever encountered. They scrutinized the ring's surface with probes and scan arrays, recording every vibration, every electromagnetic pulse, and every warp fluctuation, while debating whether its function was martial, scientific, or somehow divine. Fleet admirals faced difficult decisions. The ring's presence disrupted navigation and communication, causing entire sectors to behave unpredictably. Warp currents fluctuated, sometimes sending entire squadrons light years from their intended positions. Ships that attempted to maintain formation found themselves forced to rely on intuition and the guidance of psychers to navigate. Commanders issued strict protocols for engagement, warning crews that the ring's technology might be hazardous or even sentient. Meanwhile, orders for reconnaissance were tempered with contingency plans for retreat, boarding, and, if necessary, annihilation. No admiral dared approach recklessly, for the consequences of misjudgment could ripple across the galaxy. Inquisitors were dispatched to accompany the Mechanicus expeditions, their authority granting them oversight of both military and scientific operations. They considered the ring not only a technological mystery, but also a potential spiritual test or threat. Some preached that it was a sign from the Emperor, a challenge to human understanding and faith. Others feared it was a trap laid by Xenos or demonic entities, a temptation that could corrupt the minds of men and psychers alike. Their presence ensured that all interactions with the ring were scrutinized for heresy, corruption, or potential sacrilege. Even minor actions, such as the collection of material samples or the firing of energy scanners, required extensive justification. The first ships to approach reported a bewildering array of phenomena. Sensors overloaded with data that could not be interpreted, energy fields fluctuated erratically, and even the bravest of pilots described a sensation of being observed. Mechanicus tech priests attempted to stabilize their arrays, invoking the rites of calibration and machine prayers to counteract interference. Boarding parties, trained for extreme environments, prepared for entry into the ring's structure, donning reinforced void suits and equipping themselves with weapons modified to penetrate alien materials. These teams were briefed extensively on the potential dangers, including environmental hazards, automated defenses, and the possibility of unknown psychic traps. The Imperial Navy coordinated with planetary defense forces, establishing buffer zones around the ring to prevent accidental intrusion by civilian traffic or unauthorized ships. Outposts were fortified, and warnings were issued across communications networks, instructing local governors to prioritize military readiness. Supply convoys carrying munitions, psionic stabilizers, and repair crews were dispatched to ensure sustained operations. Meanwhile, the Adeptus Mechanicus continuously updated projections, calculating orbit patterns, potential energy emissions, and the ring's effects on nearby warp currents. Every new reading added layers of complexity, leaving fleet commanders both fascinated and frustrated by the artifact's incomprehensible scale and capability. Within the ring's orbit, skirmishes were narrowly avoided as Imperial vessels misjudged gravitational distortions or energy fluctuations. Navigators reported entire sections of space seeming to vanish temporarily before reappearing light years away. These anomalies forced captains to proceed cautiously, prioritizing observation over aggression. Tactical discussions included theories on whether the ring could be a weapon, a terraforming device, or a repository of alien knowledge. Boarding strategies were drafted with contingencies for both hostile encounters and accidental interactions with automated systems, emphasizing that even the smallest misstep could result in catastrophic loss. The psychological impact on crews was profound. Many soldiers and sailors, trained for decades of war against Xenos and heretics, found themselves facing a challenge beyond comprehension. Fear, mixed with curiosity, as they attempted to reconcile their understanding of the galaxy with the undeniable reality of the Halo Ring. Psychers aboard the vessels reported subtle disturbances in their visions and meditations, sensing threads of power that did not conform to the familiar rhythms of the warp. Even high-ranking officers noted a creeping unease, a sensation that their every action was being measured by some intelligence beyond human understanding. The Imperium's approach combined rigid caution with meticulous planning. Each step forward was calculated, with reconnaissance preceding action and every action reviewed by both military and mechanicus authorities. Boarding parties were equipped with the finest weapons and shields, and psychers were prepared to counteract any warp-induced anomalies. Scouting drones and probe ships were dispatched ahead of manned vessels, attempting to map the ring's surface and energy patterns without risking human life. Yet despite all precautions, Every fleet officer knew that the Halo Ring was not a puzzle to be solved quickly. It was a presence that demanded respect, patience, and vigilance. Even as preparations continued, reports from the frontier began to filter back with fragments of information that defied conventional analysis. Electromagnetic pulses interfered with communication channels. Readings of gravity and radiation conflicted, and minor psychic disturbances affected crews across multiple ships. The Imperium realized that the Halo Ring was not merely an anomaly to observe, but a force that could alter strategic balance, challenge understanding of the warp, and force the galaxy's greatest powers to confront limits they had never faced before. Every decision taken in the ring's vicinity carried stakes that extended far beyond the immediate mission, reshaping the very calculus of Imperial strategy and ambition. The forces of chaos stirred almost immediately upon sensing the Halo Ring's arrival, drawn by its immense, alien energies that seemed to hum with the resonance of both the material universe and the warp. Dark whispers traveled through the immaterium, carried by daemon spawn and corrupted psychers, reaching the ears of warlords, cult leaders, and sorcerers alike. These messengers spoke of power beyond imagination, of technology that could rival the might of the chaos gods themselves, and of the opportunity to reshape reality to their dark desires. Entire warbands moved silently through the void, drawn to the anomaly as if it were a beacon, each faction interpreting the ring's presence as a call to arms, a harbinger of conquest or corruption. The initial approach of Chaos fleets was cautious, yet driven by ambition. Warlords debated whether to approach openly, risking detection by the Imperium, or to infiltrate from the shadows, striking only when the moment of advantage arrived. Demonic entities whispered into the minds of mortal leaders, urging them toward acts of audacity and sacrilege. Some cults went so far as to offer blood sacrifices, believing that these rites would attune them to the ring's energies and grant insight into its ultimate purpose. Others focused on summoning minor demons to probe the artifact remotely, testing its defenses while avoiding direct confrontation with unknown technology that might resist mortal interference. Warp currents around the ring were especially turbulent, and Chaos Psychers found their powers amplified but erratic, feeding off the artifact's latent energy. Spells that normally required hours of preparation surged spontaneously, often with unintended consequences. Firestorms erupted on nearby asteroids. Voidcrafts experienced sudden psychic feedback. Then minor warp rifts formed in the vicinity, sometimes swallowing entire scout ships before closing as mysteriously as they had appeared. Yet these dangers did little to temper ambition. If anything, they were interpreted as signs that the ring was alive, conscious, and aware of the worthiness of those who dared approach it. The sorcerers and demonologists within the Chaos ranks debated endlessly over how to interact with the ring. Some advocated for direct contact, seeking to merge its alien power with the dark energies of the warp to create unstoppable weapons. Others argued for patient study, understanding that a miscalculation could result in annihilation. Secret cabals formed, each working independently, attempting to uncover patterns in the ring's strange emissions and to decipher whether its mechanisms could be corrupted, commandeered, or harnessed to serve their own ends. Rival factions often sabotaged one another, creating a dangerous web of mistrust, intrigue, and violent competition, even in the void surrounding the ring. Minor cults and warp-touched mortals took greater risks. Boarding parties sent toward the ring frequently disappeared without a trace, their psychers' minds shredded by the alien resonance of the artifact, while daemon engines hurled themselves into orbit, testing the ring's defenses and returning incomplete or corrupted reports. Some were transformed, partially merged with the alien technologies, creating hybrid monstrosities that whispered forbidden knowledge. The ring seemed to respond selectively, granting glimpses of understanding to some, while punishing others for perceived arrogance or unworthiness, further enhancing its reputation among chaos forces as a sentient and judgmental power. Even chaos fleets not directly interacting with the ring felt its influence. Energy readings fluctuated across entire sectors, compasses spun without pattern, and warp-sensitive instruments produced readings that oscillated between impossibility and revelation. Sorcerers interpreted these disturbances as signs of favor or anger from the dark gods, urging warbands to prepare, advance, or retreat accordingly. Communication between distant fleets became unreliable as the ring's influence distorted psionic signals, forcing leaders to rely on instinct, prophecy, and the guidance of favored daemons to maintain cohesion. Each misstep risked disaster, yet the potential rewards were worth any danger in the eyes of those devoted to chaos. Within the ring's immediate orbit, the interaction of its alien energies with the warp produced phenomena unlike any seen before. Vortices of psychic energy swirled unpredictably. Minor daemons were drawn to the edges of the artifact, and entire sections of space appeared to flicker between reality and the immaterium. Chaos warbands deployed experimental weapons, infused with warp energy, attempting to probe the ring's defenses. Yet, many of these attacks were absorbed, deflected, or warped into forms unrecognizable. The artifact's presence acted as both a lure and a deterrent, granting power selectively while punishing those who failed to respect its incomprehensible design. Some chaos leaders interpreted the ring as a divine instrument, a tool of fate to test their cunning, patience, and devotion. Prophecies were hastily composed, claiming that the ring would grant dominion over entire star systems to those capable of mastering it. Zealous cultists gathered in orbiting warships, performing rituals meant to attune themselves to the artifact, offering psychic energy, blood, and devotion in exchange for understanding. Rival factions scoffed at such superstition, relying instead on brute force, black market technology, or demon-engineered devices to attempt to subvert the artifact's power, resulting in clashes that left debris fields scattered across orbit. The influence of the halo ring spread beyond immediate physical space, reaching into the thoughts and dreams of chaos-aligned psychers and mortals even light years away. Nightmares became vivid visions, often depicting alien landscapes, impossible geometries, and cosmic machinery interacting with familiar worlds. These visions inspired both awe and madness, drawing followers further into the orbit of chaos ambition while destabilizing the command structures of some warbands. The artifact's presence reshaped not only tactical considerations, but the psychological state of the galaxy's most dangerous powers, merging fear, fascination, and desire into a potent motivator for conquest and sacrilege. Even in sectors not yet reached, the halo ring's distant energy resonance acted like a beacon for those attuned to corruption. Chaos fleets altered course without explicit orders, sensing a call they could neither articulate nor resist. Minor cults formed on distant planets, interpreting celestial phenomena as omens and adjusting their rituals in response. Strategic planners, both mortal and daemon, began to anticipate future opportunities, plotting campaigns and intrusions that could take advantage of the ring's unpredictable influence. The galaxy itself seemed to shift subtly under the combined weight of the ring's alien presence and the ambitions of chaos, creating a new and volatile equilibrium that challenged every expectation and threatened every calculation previously relied upon. The sudden appearance of the Halo Ring did not go unnoticed by the galaxy's Xenos races, whose civilizations had long mastered detection and observation far beyond the Imperium's limited sensors. Eldar craft silently appeared near the anomaly, their sleek vessels weaving through the turbulent warp currents with unmatched grace and precision. Farseers aboard these ships sensed threads of fate entangled with the artifact, predicting ripples that could cascade across light years and alter the destinies of entire worlds. Each movement, each pulse of alien energy was scrutinized with an intensity born from centuries of survival and an understanding that some objects held power beyond comprehension. The Eldar debated quietly among themselves, balancing curiosity with caution, for every decision could have consequences that spanned generations. The Eldar believed the Halo Ring to be a relic of an ancient civilization, possibly one whose technology had reached a level beyond even the craft world's greatest constructs. Scholars and warlocks argued over whether it should be studied, avoided, or neutralized, recognizing that missteps could awaken latent mechanisms or defensive systems that might spell doom for any who approached. Silent observation became the primary strategy, as they used long-range psionic probes and predictive modeling to map not only the ring's physical presence, but its potential interactions with the warp. Each scan revealed patterns of energy and geometry that defied conventional understanding, hinting at intelligence, purpose, and a scale of design that dwarfed anything previously encountered. Other Xenos races reacted differently. The Tau Empire, ever practical and methodical, dispatched exploratory fleets to assess the Halo Ring's strategic and technological potential. Sensors recorded impossible energy readings, fields of strange matter, and subtle distortions in space-time, all of which prompted debates in high command over whether the ring could be harnessed, neutralized, or observed safely. Military planners considered deploying drones and probe ships first, ensuring minimal risk to valuable personnel. At the same time, they recognized that any engagement would require constant adaptation, as the ring's effects on nearby space disrupted conventional navigation and communications. Every observation became a cautious negotiation between curiosity, caution, and ambition. Orks, less restrained by logic, approached with boundless recklessness and a sense of awe, seeing the ring as both a playground and a potential source of endless conquest. Their fleets surged toward it in chaotic formations, ramming and firing indiscriminately, driven more by instinct and excitement than strategy. Even among the Orks, shamanic leaders sensed the ring's power and whispered that it might be a machine of war or a source of great energy for their wall. The unpredictable energy fields, gravity fluctuations, and occasional warp distortions were treated as challenges to be overcome rather than threats, fueling their aggressive curiosity and prompting the construction of improvised boarding vessels and scavenger crews ready to seize anything the ring might offer. The Drukhari, ever sly and stealthy, viewed the ring as an opportunity for both plunder and manipulation. Raiders and shadow fleets attempted covert surveys, probing the ring's outer edges for weaknesses or resources to exploit. Their actions were precise and calculated, designed to avoid both detection and engagement with the Imperium or Chaos forces already converging. Each exploratory mission gathered not only physical data, but also subtle psychic impressions. As the Drukhari sought to understand the artifact's influence on mind and spirit, they recognized that patience and guile could yield rewards far greater than brute force, a lesson honed over millennia of predation and survival in the galaxy's shadows. Even the Tau, despite their technological rigor, found themselves humbled by the alien intelligence inherent in the Halo ring. Its systems emitted signals that did not match any known physics or energy pattern, challenging their engineers and analysts to reconsider fundamental principles. Commands sent to drones and remote scanners often returned contradictory or corrupted results, forcing Tau strategists to rely on cautious trial and error, carefully documenting anomalies while avoiding undue risk. Reports of minor fluctuations in gravitational and energy fields created heated discussions in high command, where theoretical physicists debated whether the ring was self-aware or merely operating on a level of sophistication beyond current comprehension. The Necrons, though few in immediate presence, were alerted by the ring's arrival through ancient monitoring systems and energy fluctuations. Tomb worlds stirred, and cryptic emissaries were dispatched to observe and assess, for the ring represented a potential threat or a dormant relic from a civilization contemporaneous with their own long-lost dynasties. Their approach was methodical, measured, and inscrutable, reflecting a patience born from millennia of calculated intervention. Every movement, every probe, every sensor reading was cataloged with precision, and the Necron understanding of time allowed them to predict the ring's potential effects over centuries rather than mere decades. The interaction of these various Xenos forces created a tense ballet around the Halo ring. While some raced forward with curiosity, others hung back in silent vigilance, each calculating risk versus reward. Minor skirmishes erupted sporadically when Orks collided with Eldar patrols or Tau scouts stumbled into Drukhari observation zones. Yet the ring remained the center of attention, its massive presence demanding both caution and reverence. Each faction interpreted its existence through their own lens, shaping strategies and alliances in real time, knowing that misjudgment could lead to catastrophic losses or unforeseen consequences. Even from afar, the Xenos sensed that the Halo ring was more than a passive structure. Energy pulses, subtle gravitational shifts, and psionic disturbances suggested not only immense technological capability, but perhaps intention, as if the ring itself was aware of the observers and responding to them. Eldar warlocks whispered that it could be a test or a probe, while Tau scientists debated its mechanisms and Necron monitors recorded patterns that spanned millennia of calculations. Every faction knew that understanding, approaching, or interacting with the ring required patience, intellect, and a delicate balance of boldness and restraint. The Halo ring became a focal point for the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, a convergence of curiosity, ambition, and caution that transcended even the ongoing wars and rivalries of the known species. Its presence challenged every assumption about technology, strategy, and the nature of the cosmos, forcing Xenos races to confront mysteries that could reshape their understanding of the universe itself. Every observation, every probe, every skirmish or negotiation around it carried implications far beyond the immediate moment, setting the stage for interactions that could alter the balance of power across light years of space. The presence of the halo ring began to reshape the very space around it, creating environmental effects that confounded every faction in the galaxy. Stellar bodies near the ring exhibited subtle but undeniable distortions. Planets wobbled slightly in their orbits. Asteroid belts shifted with new patterns, and even stars seemed to pulse with a rhythm influenced by the massive structure. Sensors aboard Imperial void ships detected energy fields that fluctuated unpredictably, sometimes interacting with warp currents to form localized storms of psychic energy. Navigators reported sudden drops in speed and inexplicable gravitational eddies, forcing captains to adjust trajectories constantly. The galaxy, as it had been known, seemed to bend and flex around the ring, as though space itself were acknowledging the arrival of a presence far beyond comprehension. Radiation readings proved equally perplexing. Exotic emissions of types unknown to even the most learned Adeptus Mechanicus scholars radiated outward from the ring, creating zones of interference that affected both instruments and minds. Astropathic signals warped and twisted, while void communications were delayed or scrambled entirely when passing through affected regions. Sensors detected bursts of electromagnetic energy that appeared to have no source other than the ring itself, and when ships tried to measure the phenomenon, the readings often contradicted one another, defying the laws of physics. Crews aboard these vessels reported headaches, vertigo, and a creeping sense that the universe itself was observing them, pressing them to reconsider every assumption about reality. The warp itself was influenced in ways more subtle, yet more dangerous. Psychers aboard Imperial, Xenos, and even Chaos ships reported fluctuations that were simultaneously alarming and fascinating. Warp currents that had been predictable for decades became turbulent, forming pockets of instability and loops that defied navigation. Some warp-sensitive individuals described visions of alien geometries, impossible landscapes, and machinery intertwined with living energy, as if the ring's own systems were extending into the immaterium. Minor warp storms erupted seemingly at random, sometimes devouring entire scout ships, while other times stabilizing areas of space previously considered dangerous. The ring's interference created a new form of environmental hazard, one that could not be mitigated by shields, strategy, or even sheer firepower. Planets within several light years began to show early signs of alteration. Tides shifted slightly, seasons arrived out of sequence, and auroras danced across skies in strange alien patterns. Scientists aboard observation posts scrambled to record data, while Adeptus Mechanicus teams debated whether the phenomena were natural consequences of the ring's mass and energy emissions or a deliberate function of its design. Some theorized that the ring was actively terraforming space, adjusting gravitational and magnetic fields to maintain stability across its orbit. Others speculated that the environmental effects were byproducts of the alien technology, side effects of energy systems operating at scales beyond human understanding. Radiation storms became another unpredictable challenge, Bolts of energy, sometimes visible as shimmering arcs across empty space, erupted without warning, damaging or completely destroying smaller vessels. Pilots reported that their instruments would temporarily go blind in such zones, while larger ships experienced power fluctuations and erratic system behaviors. Astropathic interference caused miscommunications and momentary lapses in psychic perception, leaving entire fleets vulnerable to collisions, miscalculations, or sudden attacks. The environmental instability forced captains to prioritize observation over aggression, understanding that reckless movements could be fatal even without enemy interference. Even in orbit, the ring's influence was impossible to ignore. Its immense gravitational pull caused subtle tides in nearby gas giants, shifting clouds in unexpected ways and occasionally triggering minor storms on orbiting moons. The massive structure seemed to exert a quiet dominion over its surroundings, a reminder of its sheer scale and the power it contained. Engineers aboard Imperial ships worked tirelessly to compensate, recalibrating engines, shields, and sensors to withstand the constantly changing gravitational and electromagnetic conditions. Each correction brought temporary stability, only to be challenged again as the ring subtly adjusted its orbit or emitted new pulses of energy. The Xenos fleets that observed the phenomenon reacted with equal caution. Eldar vessels adjusted their flight paths to avoid areas of sudden warp turbulence, while the Tau relied on automated drones and remote scanners to chart zones too dangerous for crewed exploration. Ork ships, less concerned with environmental hazards, often collided with energy surges or gravitational anomalies, their reckless enthusiasm causing chaotic disruptions that forced even the most methodical fleets to pause and reconsider. Even the Necrons, operating with ancient patience and precise calculation, detected small but significant distortions in local space, prompting adjustments in deployment strategies and sensor calibration. Minor celestial objects became increasingly unpredictable. Comets deviated from their orbits. Asteroid fragments accelerated along strange trajectories, and small moons experienced localized quakes and magnetic surges. Observers speculated that the ring's own energy fields were interacting with planetary and asteroid magnetospheres, creating phenomena that were at once mesmerizing and dangerous. Shipboard crews described witnessing space itself shimmer with light bending in unnatural patterns, stars appearing to shift slightly in position, and the void itself seeming to ripple like a cosmic ocean. Such effects heightened the sense that the halo ring was not merely a structure, but a force of environmental manipulation, operating on scales both vast and subtle. Even the vacuum of space seemed alive with residual energy. Subtle waves of radiation and magnetic distortion extended for light years, creating zones where conventional weaponry behaved erratically and propulsion systems struggled to maintain efficiency. Fleet movements required careful planning, accounting for the ring's variable influence on gravitational wells, energy fields, and warp pathways. Every faction operating nearby had to constantly adapt, relying on a combination of intuition, technology, and psionic awareness to survive the environmental chaos. The Halo Ring had transformed the surrounding sector into a dynamic, living battlefield, where the laws of physics were suggestions, not guarantees, and even the smallest oversight could have devastating consequences. The environmental effects also began to influence decision-making on a strategic level. Commanders and leaders had to consider not only the immediate threat of enemy fleets, but also the constant, shifting hazards imposed by the ring itself. Planning missions required simulations that accounted for unpredictable gravitational anomalies, radiation bursts, and warp distortions, forcing even the most experienced tacticians to adapt rapidly. As observations continued, it became increasingly clear that the Halo ring's impact extended far beyond its immediate orbit, reshaping not just local space, but the broader environment of the sector in ways that demanded constant attention, adaptation, and respect. The first skirmishes surrounding the Halo ring erupted almost immediately as Imperial, Chaos, and Xenos forces converged on the anomaly, each driven by curiosity, ambition, or devotion. Imperial battle fleets, cautiously navigating warped sectors and unstable gravitational fields, collided with scouting parties from Eldar craft that sought to map the ring's orbit and energy emissions. Misunderstandings were inevitable. Sensors failed, instruments glitched, and psychic disturbances amplified tensions. Minor confrontations quickly escalated into volleys of bolter fire, plasma discharges, and energy beams crossing in a deadly ballet, the void itself echoing with the resonance of ancient alien technology. Each faction believed it had the right to control or study the ring, leaving no room for diplomacy in a space already distorted by its presence. Imperial commanders, despite their rigid discipline, found themselves improvising as the environmental anomalies interfered with navigation and targeting systems. Entire squadrons would drift off course, unexpectedly colliding with Eldar or Ork craft, prompting emergency maneuvers and ad hoc formations. Boarding parties deployed on small craft to approach the ring's surface faced automated defenses that responded unpredictably, triggering deadly traps that shredded armor and tore void suits apart. Mechanicus Magi techno-scholars scrambled to adapt, attempting to override systems and decode alien signals while their escorts fought off intruding forces. The first contact was chaotic, violent, and uncertain, leaving both victors and survivors shaken by the sheer scale of the unknown. Chaos warbands took advantage of the confusion, striking from unexpected angles and using warp-tainted technology to disrupt both Imperial and Xenos forces. Daemonic manifestations flared near the ring's edges, appearing as fleeting shadows or bursts of eldritch light, sowing panic and confusion among more disciplined fleets. Cultists boarded smaller craft, sacrificing themselves to open new breaches, allowing greater demonic influence to extend. The ring's alien energies seemed to react selectively, at times empowering chaos forces, at times turning their attacks back upon them, creating a battlefield in which the line between chance, strategy, and cosmic judgment blurred. Xenos fleets operated with varying degrees of caution and precision. The Eldar, relying on foresight and psychic prediction, attempted to strike at key positions on the ring, aiming to gather knowledge or disable potential threats. Tau drones and probe ships executed rapid maneuvers to scan and avoid both environmental hazards and hostile fire, prioritizing data over destruction. Orks, true to form, surged forward recklessly, their ships ramming and firing indiscriminately, often colliding with allies and enemies alike. Even the most disciplined commanders could do little to control the chaos, as the ring's presence amplified disorder and rewarded audacity, creating unpredictable patterns of engagement across the void. The very fabric of space became a weapon and a hazard. Gravitational anomalies and radiation bursts created zones where weaponry behaved erratically. Bolters misfired, energy cannons overloaded, and psychic attacks sometimes reflected back onto their casters. Navigators struggled to maintain formation while accounting for warp distortions that shifted trajectories mid-battle. Pilots described the sensation of stars bending and space rippling around them, as if the halo ring were observing and manipulating the conflict. Environmental hazards, combined with aggressive maneuvers, produced catastrophic results for smaller ships, leaving debris fields littered across the orbit of the ring and adding a layer of danger that made every movement uncertain. Amid the chaos, boarding operations became focal points of contention. Imperial and Chaos Marines, aided by Psykers and Daemon-engineered constructs, attempted to land on accessible surfaces of the ring, while Eldar strike teams moved with precision to investigate alien constructs or gather information. Firefights erupted in the corridors and structures, revealed by gravity-stabilized landing zones, with energy beams and bolters carving through space and metal. Automated Forerunner defenses activated unpredictably, adding another deadly variable to engagements already complicated by faction rivalries. Every boarding attempt risked exposure to both alien technology and enemy combatants, turning even minor missions into brutal contests of skill, endurance, and luck. Conflicts were not limited to physical engagements. Psykers from both the Imperium and Chaos experienced amplified disturbances due to the ring's interaction with the warp. Psychic duels erupted in the void, invisible to most observers, but leaving tangible effects on ships and crews. Eldar warlocks attempted to project influence to manipulate outcomes, while Chaos sorcerers sought to bend the energies to destructive ends. Unchecked, these battles reshaped energy fields and gravity pockets, causing sudden disruptions that shifted entire squadrons or destroyed vulnerable ships. The battlefield became as much a contest of will and perception as of firepower, with reality itself responding to the interplay of technology, warp, and psychic force. Civilian and support craft, often unaware of the full scale of the conflict, suffered disproportionately. Supply convoys and observation vessels were caught in crossfire or drawn into warp distortions, their crews struggling to survive against forces beyond their training. Imperial authorities struggled to maintain control, issuing urgent directives to protect assets while ensuring the flow of information to commanders remained intact. Even the most cautious of observers could not avoid the ring's subtle manipulations, which seemed to reward boldness, cunning, or chaos, creating a theater of war in which traditional tactics often failed. The consequences of the first encounters rippled outward. Fleets sustained damage and losses that required rapid adaptation, forcing commanders to rethink strategies in real time. Rival factions studied each other's movements, anticipating potential alliances, betrayals, or sudden attacks. Every decision carried weight, as the ring's alien presence constantly altered environmental conditions, forcing engagement plans to remain flexible. Commanders learned quickly that aggression, patience, and observation all carried risk, and that mastery of both technology and the unpredictable dynamics of the Halo's vicinity was essential to survival. Even brief skirmishes left lasting impressions on those involved. Pilots, Marines, psychers, and commanders carried the memory of distorted space, alien defenses, and the eerie awareness that the ring itself was not passive. The first conflicts had established a brutal precedent. Control of the Halo Ring would require more than firepower or cunning alone. It demanded adaptability, courage, and the ability to survive in a battlefield where reality itself could turn against you at any moment. Observers realized that the war for the ring was not just against opposing forces, but against the artifact's unpredictable influence, a challenge that would define every subsequent encounter in the surrounding sectors. As Imperial and Xenos forces cautiously explored the Halo Ring, they began to encounter evidence of Forerunner technology, ancient and incomprehensible in design. The structures that punctuated the ring's surface were vast, geometrically precise, and seemingly alive, humming with energy that did not correspond to any known principles of the Imperium or Xenos science. Mechanicus tech priests stared in awe at conduits and panels that responded to proximity, opening corridors or activating machinery without apparent input. Energy fields pulsed rhythmically, almost as if the entire ring was a sentient organism, responding to the presence of those who dared to approach or trespass. Every observation suggested that the ring was not merely a weapon or station, but a monumental archive of knowledge, engineering, and power. The first boarding parties sent by the Imperium faced both opportunity and peril. Ancient corridors wound through the structure, lined with mechanisms that seemed to anticipate movement, opening and closing in patterns that challenged understanding. Bolts of energy occasionally discharged from walls or floors, harmless yet unnervingly precise, suggesting defensive systems designed to test or deter intruders. Psychers accompanying these teams reported visions of alien symbols, star systems, and complex machinery, often blending past, present, and potential futures. Even the most experienced tech priests recognized that these constructs were not only functional, but encoded with layers of logic and intelligence far beyond the Adeptus Mechanicus's comprehension. The Eldar approached the discoveries with reverent caution. Farseers and warlocks interpreted the patterns of Forerunner architecture as threads of destiny woven into the fabric of the ring itself. Their psychic probes revealed corridors that seemed to respond to intent, opening pathways only to those whose presence aligned with the structure's mysterious purposes. Some Eldar claimed that the technology could foresee potential outcomes, subtly guiding travelers to certain locations while denying access to others. This understanding made them both cautious and respectful, for the ring's systems were far too advanced to confront directly, and arrogance could trigger defenses capable of annihilation. Chaos forces, conversely, sought to exploit the technology with reckless ambition. Sorcerers attempted to tap into the alien systems, forcing warp-infused energy into the conduits in hopes of commandeering the machinery. The results were often catastrophic. Localized energy surges, unpredictable telekinetic discharges, and, in some cases, demonic manifestations physically merging with Forerunner constructs. Cultists who survived these experiments returned with fragmented minds and visions of impossible geometries, further proving that the ring's technology was not merely mechanical, but semi-sentient, capable of resisting interference and adapting to threats. Even the most audacious warlords learned to respect its subtle authority. The Tau, with their disciplined scientific approach, deployed drones and sensor arrays in systematic sweeps. Data collected from these scans revealed materials and energy patterns that defied classification. Constructs seemed to manipulate gravity locally, channel energy across seemingly impossible distances, and interface with environmental phenomena, as if the ring itself were an operating system, integrating its surroundings. Tau engineers debated theories regarding the technology's origin, function, and potential applications, noting that each discovery carried implications that could advance their civilization or destroy it entirely if mishandled. Risk assessment became an ongoing conversation, balancing curiosity with survival instincts. Even orcs, chaotic and impulsive, were intrigued. Some of their scavenger crews attempted to dismantle smaller systems or harness energy conduits, often resulting in violent explosions that obliterated both machinery and orc squads. Yet, in their chaotic experimentation, they occasionally activated dormant mechanisms, inadvertently causing defensive systems to respond, corridors to open, or minor energy pulses to surge across the ring. These interactions, while unplanned, underscored the semi-responsive nature of the Forerunner technology. It reacted intelligently, not aggressively, assessing the presence of intruders and adapting to their methods, whether methodical or reckless. The environmental integration of the ring's technology became increasingly evident. Gravity, light, and energy systems responded dynamically to the presence of observers and intruders. Automated panels shifted subtly to facilitate movement or impede progress. Doors and hallways adjusted angles, seemingly anticipating paths chosen by explorers. Even energy fields, once static and incomprehensible, demonstrated a form of semi-sentience, amplifying or dampening responses based on proximity, intent, and perceived threat. Imperial tech priests documented these effects with awe, recognizing that understanding the full extent of the technology might take centuries, if it was possible at all within a human lifetime. Psychers navigating the ring's interior experienced phenomena that blurred the lines between technology and consciousness. Symbols, lights, and mechanical hums resonated with latent psychic energy, triggering visions that transcended linear perception. Some described seeing entire civilizations rise and fall in moments, planets orbiting in perfect geometric harmony, and machinery operating with deliberate awareness. The blending of psychic impressions with functional observation suggested that the Forerunner systems were not purely mechanical, but designed to interface with consciousness, whether human, Xenos, or otherwise. Each encounter left a profound impression on those who survived, altering strategies and fostering a deep respect for the intelligence embedded in the ring. As data accumulated, a sense of both wonder and dread spread among all observing forces. Forerunner technology revealed pathways, mechanisms, and structures that could offer unimaginable power if understood, but also punish those who interfered recklessly. Boarding parties, both Imperial and Xenos, navigated corridors with caution, aware that every action could trigger automatic defenses or unknowable responses. Energy flows, gravity manipulations, and semi-sentient systems created a constantly shifting landscape within the ring, transforming exploration into a delicate balance between ingenuity, faith, and survival. The discovery of Forerunner technology fundamentally altered every faction's perception of the Halo ring. It was no longer merely a massive structure in space or a potential weapon. It was a repository of intelligence, energy, and systems operating on a scale far beyond comprehension. Each interaction provided glimpses into an alien mind, encoded across matter, energy, and psychic resonance. Commanders, tech priests, and psychers understood that mastery of these systems would be a monumental task, requiring patience, insight, and humility. The ring's very presence challenged understanding, demanding adaptation, reverence, and the recognition that even the most powerful civilizations had arrived at the threshold of knowledge they might never fully grasp. The sudden appearance of the Halo Ring forced factions across the galaxy to reassess loyalties and strategies, and unlikely alliances began to form under the weight of necessity. Imperial commanders, wary of both chaos incursions and Xenos curiosity, considered temporary truces with certain Eldar craft, whose psychic foresight could provide critical insight into warp disturbances and the ring's defenses. Tentative communications were established, mediated by psychers capable of bridging comprehension gaps, yet each party remained vigilant, knowing that betrayal could occur at the first sign of weakness. Every gesture, every shared observation was loaded with suspicion, as centuries of conflict and distrust made trust a scarce commodity. Chaos forces, ever opportunistic, exploited this fragile tension. Some warlords proposed temporary pacts with other factions, offering knowledge of the ring's anomalies in exchange for safe passage or shared plunder. Others acted as double agents, supplying misleading information or sabotage while pretending to collaborate. Cults embedded within Imperial fleets sowed confusion, manipulating commanders and engineers into making miscalculations, while Daemon-infused scouts infiltrated Xenos reconnaissance missions. Trust was a weapon as dangerous as bolters or plasma beams, and alliances often unraveled the moment the ring's semi-sentient defenses reacted unpredictably to intrusions. Eldar, skilled in subtle manipulation and foresight, navigated these precarious alliances with care. Farseers predicted potential betrayals and adjusted strategies, offering selective guidance to Imperium units while quietly steering their own teams to areas of interest. Small contingents shared scans and warp readings with human fleets, using psychic wards to protect both themselves and their allies from the ring's anomalies. Yet even as information flowed, the Eldar remained aware that any misstep could spark betrayal or conflict, and they prepared contingency plans to escape, observe, or strike if allies acted contrary to expectations. The Tau approached alliance with precision, evaluating potential partnerships based on measurable benefit rather than ideology. Their emissaries offered technology, reconnaissance, and tactical insight in exchange for information about the ring's energy systems and structural integrity. While practical, these arrangements were fraught with risk. Imperial captains often doubted the Tau's motives, and Chaos fleets actively attempted to exploit any perceived weakness. Each interaction required meticulous planning, verification, and monitoring, as one miscalculated move could unravel carefully laid plans, leaving fleets vulnerable to environmental hazards, automated defenses, or opportunistic attacks from rival factions. Even Ork forces played a chaotic role in the evolving alliances. Their unpredictable aggression disrupted fragile truces, forcing factions to either engage or maneuver around them. In some cases, Orks inadvertently acted as unintentional allies, charging into chaos boarding parties or colliding with Imperial skirmishers, creating openings for tactical advantage. Yet in others, their behavior caused alliances to fracture under the strain of unexpected destruction. Their chaotic influence made negotiation difficult, but it also offered opportunities for factions willing to adapt rapidly and exploit the mayhem in the ring's orbit. Within the Imperium, internal divisions added complexity. Some commanders argued for strict control and unilateral action against both Xenos and Chaos, while others recognized the strategic necessity of temporary cooperation. Councils of war debated extensively, weighing the risks of information sharing against the potential gains of coordinated exploration or mutual defense. Psychers and tech priests mediated communication between ships, translating data into actionable strategy while remaining alert to signs of betrayal. Every decision carried weight, for one misstep could expose entire fleets to the ring's unpredictable systems or enemy action. Chaos forces, in parallel, exploited factional mistrust to their advantage. Sorcerers and demonologists crafted elaborate ruses, proposing alliances only to turn on their temporary partners when opportunity struck. Demonic whispers encouraged treachery, inflaming ambition and paranoia within allied ranks. Subtle manipulation ensured that even when agreements were formally reached, each side maintained an undercurrent of self-interest, ready to abandon or betray when advantageous. In the turbulent environment near the ring, betrayal was not an exception, but an expected element of survival, creating a tense atmosphere in which no faction could fully rely on any other. Xenos races navigated these alliances with strategic calculation. Eldar warlocks predicted chaos maneuvers and imperial decision-making, sharing select knowledge to manipulate outcomes. Tau commanders calculated every exchange for measurable advantage, adjusting troop and drone deployments in real time. Orks, unpredictable as ever, forced factions to anticipate chaos, turning minor skirmishes into tests of adaptability. The ring's environmental hazards amplified these dynamics, with gravitational anomalies, radiation bursts, and warp disturbances punishing hesitation or error and rewarding calculated risk. Every alliance was thus both a shield and a potential trap, requiring constant vigilance. Information became the most valuable currency. Scans, energy readings, and psychic impressions were exchanged, often selectively, with critical details withheld or distorted. Alliances were negotiated through observation, intuition, and prophecy as much as formal communication, with each faction calculating potential betrayals and contingencies. Imperial fleets, Chaos warbands, Eldar craft, Tau drones, and Ork crews all maneuvered in a delicate balance, where a single false signal or misinterpreted gesture could trigger conflict, expose vulnerabilities, or provoke an automated defense system within the ring itself. Trust, where it existed, was temporary and fragile, and every action was scrutinized through the lens of potential treachery. Even when factions coordinated successfully, betrayals were inevitable. Chaos agents infiltrated temporary Imperial teams. Eldar foresight occasionally misread intentions, and Ork impulses disrupted carefully plotted maneuvers. Each betrayal was both a tactical lesson and a warning, reinforcing the precarious nature of alliances in the ring's orbit. The artifact itself, semi-sentient and responsive, seemed to test the limits of cooperation and deception, amplifying mistrust, encouraging audacity, and punishing overconfidence. Through it all, commanders and leaders learned that survival depended not just on firepower or skill, but on reading the intentions of allies and enemies alike in an ever-shifting web of ambition, fear, and opportunity. The arrival of the Halo Ring in the Warhammer 40K galaxy triggered consequences that reverberated across countless star systems, reshaping political, military, and spiritual landscapes. Imperial authorities realized that the artifact's presence challenged both the Emperor's dominion and the very understanding of reality itself. Fleets that had once operated with predictable warp currents now faced anomalies that rendered conventional strategy unreliable. Psychers reported visions of entire galaxies in flux, of civilizations rising and falling in patterns dictated by forces beyond mortal comprehension. Scholars debated whether the ring was merely an artifact of engineering or a conscious agent, influencing outcomes on scales that dwarfed even the Imperium's largest war efforts. The Chaos Forces, sensing the immense power contained within the ring, found themselves both empowered and restrained. While the artifact amplified warp energies in certain regions, it also punished overreach, turning raw ambition into self-destruction for those unprepared. Cults that had once operated independently began to coalesce, seeking to interpret the ring's signals and manipulate them to summon demonic power. Warlords attempted to exploit alliances and betrayals alike, yet the unpredictable interactions between the artifact's technology and the warp produced outcomes that confounded even the most seasoned strategists. Chaos learned that the Halo Ring was neither servant nor weapon, but an entity that enforced balance, testing cunning and ambition in equal measure. Xenos civilizations reevaluated their approach to the Imperium and each other. Eldar foresaw threads of destiny altered by the ring, adjusting craftworld movements and advising allied Imperial units in secret, while carefully avoiding revealing full comprehension. The Tau Empire debated the potential of harnessing the ring's technology for expansion or defense, recognizing that miscalculation could invite ruin. Orks treated it as both an obstacle and opportunity, their reckless incursions disrupting broader plans and forcing other factions to adapt continually. Even the Necrons, slow to act but ever calculating, registered the ring as a potential ancient rival or long-lost relic, prompting cryptic signals and silent monitoring that reshaped strategic priorities across sectors. Entire war zones became unpredictable theaters where environmental anomalies intertwined with factional conflict. Gravitational distortions, radiation bursts, and warp turbulence made conventional tactics unreliable, forcing commanders to improvise or retreat. Imperial fleets, trained for precise formation maneuvers, had to adapt to constantly shifting hazards, while Chaos Forces exploited these fluctuations to sow confusion. Xenos scouts relied on stealth and psychic prediction, yet even their most careful planning could be undone by subtle changes in the ring's influence. Survival and control became contingent not solely on firepower, but on the ability to read an environment that was as alive and reactive as any sentient opponent. Strategically, the ring's influence forced long-term recalculations. Sectors once considered secure were now unpredictable, necessitating redeployment of garrisons, additional fortifications, and permanent observation posts. Imperial High Lords debated the ethics and necessity of allocating precious resources to monitor or attempt control of the artifact, weighing the benefits against the dangers of exposure to chaos and Xenos opportunism. Chaos strategists recognized that conventional conquest was insufficient. Understanding, manipulation, and timing were paramount, and misjudgment could lead to catastrophic loss of both fleets and followers. The discovery of Forerunner technology intensified these consequences. The semi-sentient systems within the ring offered glimpses of impossible power, yet their operation was incomprehensible to even the most advanced tech priests and engineers. Imperial boarding parties, Eldar strike teams, and Tau drone scouts all encountered defensive systems that reacted intelligently, responding to intent, proximity, and even psychological state. Each interaction generated data, but interpretation proved challenging, requiring coordination, secrecy, and sometimes ruthless decision-making. Attempts to reverse engineer the systems often resulted in unintended activation of energy fields or security protocols, reinforcing the notion that the ring was a force to be respected rather than dominated. Alliances formed and dissolved under the ring's shadow, with betrayals altering the balance of power on a constant basis. Temporary truces between Imperium and Eldar forces, between chaos and opportunistic Xenos, and even between rival chaos warlords were necessary for survival, but precarious. Each faction learned that every cooperative effort carried potential consequences, and that the ring itself seemed to manipulate events, punishing hubris and rewarding calculated patience. These dynamics influence decision-making at every level, from fleet admirals to boarding squads, reshaping strategies, hierarchies, and power projections throughout multiple sectors. On a psychological and cultural level, the ring's presence left lasting impressions. Imperial psychers and scholars reported visions that challenged theology, cosmology, and history, suggesting truths that could undermine faith or reshape understanding of the Emperor's will. Chaos cults became more ambitious, interpreting the ring as a divine or infernal test. Xenos civilizations debated the consequences of interacting with alien intelligence far beyond their current comprehension, weighing curiosity against caution. Even individual soldiers and pilots experienced profound unease, sensing that the ring's presence extended beyond technology into the realms of consciousness, intention, and influence. The galactic economy of information and technology shifted irreversibly. Knowledge gained from proximity to the halo ring, whether successful or disastrous, became a commodity with immense value. Strategic planning now required not only anticipation of enemy moves, but understanding of semi-sentient technology and unpredictable environmental anomalies. The chain of command, previously rooted in predictable causality, had to incorporate uncertainty on a cosmic scale, adjusting tactics and priorities in real time while considering the long-term implications of knowledge acquired, alliances formed, and betrayals encountered. Ultimately, the Halo Ring became more than a physical structure or military objective. It acted as a catalyst for change, reshaping strategy, politics, and perception across the galaxy. Its influence forced all factions to reconsider not just immediate gains, but the long-term consequences of actions taken in its orbit. The artifact challenged civilizations to adapt, survive, and comprehend phenomena far beyond ordinary comprehension. Power, ambition, and curiosity all collided under the ring's presence, leaving the galaxy transformed, uncertain, and aware that the arrival of a single alien artifact could ripple across millennia, altering the destiny of countless worlds, fleets, and civilizations in ways that would be studied, feared, and mythologized for generations to come.